Welcome in to Palmetto Sports Daily. I'm Carmine here in Greenville, joined by Julia Westerman in Columbia, Tegan Brown over in Myrtle Beach, and Kevin Bilodeau in Charleston. And we start with some somber news because it'll be a celebration of life for the late, great Eldon Campbell coming up this Friday. Doors open at 5 o'clock, open to the public. The ceremony starts at 6 o'clock, and then they'll also do the same thing at 5 o'clock on Saturday and 6 o'clock on Saturday. Doors opening at 5, and the reception and celebration of life starting at 6. That'll be at the Best Western in Clemson, and like I said, open to the public. So anybody watching who wants to honor Eldon, feel free, because he deserves honoring after just passing away unexpectedly at 57 years old, an accidental drowning after suffering a medical emergency while fishing in Florida. A 3-time All-ACC selection. First year helped the Tigers to a 25-6 record in the NCAA tournament appearance as Horace Grant's backup center. So how about that 1-2 punch for the Clemson Tigers? As a sophomore, 19 points a game, third-team All-ACC. As a junior, 17.5 points per game for Clemson's NCAA tournament team. And as a senior, he teamed up with Dale Davis, one of the best Tigers teams of all time, to give Clemson one of the top front court combos in the country. And both were named honorable mention All-American by the AP, the only time Clemson has had 2 All-Americans on the same team. They won the ACC regular season championship, the only one in school history, finished with a 26-9 record, went to the Sweet 16 of the NCAA tournament, and his 1,880 career points are still the all-time record in Clemson scoring history, still standing 35 years after he played in his last game, and also had a successful pro career. You saw him in the Lakers uniform there. 15 total seasons in the NBA, went to the NBA Finals as a rookie with the Lakers and Magic Johnson. They lost to Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls, but he did get that NBA championship about a decade later with the Detroit Pistons, scored more than 10,000 career points, and still ranks third in blocks in Los Angeles Lakers history, behind only Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Shaquille O'Neal, 2 pretty good all-time centers. So celebration of life, like I mentioned, for Eldon is this Friday, 5 o'clock, doors open, 6 o'clock the ceremony starts, and that's the same on Saturday as well, because it's all around alumni weekend with all the Clemson men's basketball legends coming together, Kevin, to honor such a legend of the upstate and really a legend in all of basketball. Several NBA arenas honoring Eldon after his passing just last month as well.
Yeah, it's hard to overstate how much he meant to this Clemson program, because you mentioned all the things he did early on when he first got to Clemson, and he was backing up guys who would go on to the NBA, and he was that 1-2 punch with Dale Davis later on in his career. But, Clemson basketball wasn't known for much up to that point in the early 90s when Campbell got there, and he got them to NCAA tournaments, and they made runs in that NCAA tournament. So he was a huge part, and like you said, still the all-time leading scorer, so that's a big deal. And then to go on and play 15 years in the NBA in a time when that's still not easy to do for anyone, to play double-digit seasons in the NBA. But playing for the Lakers, going to a final, winning a championship as part of that Pistons team that ran over the Lakers team that had Kobe and Shaq, so that was a big deal as well. Anytime you can get a ring, that's nothing to sneeze at either. Also had time with the Charlotte Hornets, the Sonics, the Pistons, and the New Jersey Nets. So a great career both in college and the pros for Eldon Campbell, and it's great to see that even in his passing, he's getting his remembrance from the Clemson community, Carmine.
Yeah, very true. Great Clemson career, putting the Tigers on the map to some extent with the legendary coach Ellis over there in Tiger Town. And so we'll definitely have much more about that on our website, foxcarolina.com. We'll take a quick break, then we'll get to some women's hoops, the Gamecocks with a top 5 matchup tonight. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Palmetto Sports Daily. We've got a massive women's basketball game on deck tonight, as long as you're watching this show before 7 o'clock Eastern. South Carolina hosts Texas, and this is the second time that these two teams will meet this season, but the first time that it will have implications toward SEC standings. Of course, these teams met back in late November in Las Vegas at the Players Era Championship, and it was a close one. South Carolina lost by 2 points. It's their only loss of the season so far. So a lot on the line as we get closer to this game tonight. South Carolina, of course, looking to avenge that loss from earlier this season and kind of cement themselves at the top of the SEC standings as we're, almost midway through the conference slate at this point. But of course, Texas kind of bringing a lot to the table as well. They are 18-1 to South Carolina's 17-1. And so this is a really, heavyweight matchup going on tonight. Texas, of course, coming in off of their first loss of the season on Sunday, an upset loss to LSU in Baton Rouge. This, of course, created a big narrative for Texas head coach Vic Schaefer after the game. He was talking about how it's not fair for his Longhorns to have to go on the road and play LSU, and they lost to LSU, and then have to turn around and come to Columbia and play South Carolina in this top 5 matchup. So there's been a lot swirling around that narrative all this week. Dawn Staley, of course, was asked about it yesterday, and she said, "Don't give us anything. We expect nothing." She says they've been the league's top team for a while now, so she doesn't expect to be given any handouts when it comes to scheduling. But as it stands with the standings, she knows that this has a lot. There's a lot on the line with this game and kind of how it can break down who's going to be at the top at the end of this conference slate, as well as seeding for the conference tournament in March. So she talked a little bit about, does she discuss that with her players?
I did mention it. I mentioned it after our last game. Just the ramifications of wins and losses and tiebreakers and all of that, and seeding, NCAA selection seeding, and what they look for, and this type of matchup they grade you on. So yes, a little bit, but I don't think they're tuned into that right now. They're really locked into the end.
Well, guys, of course, South Carolina is 4-0 in conference play so far. Texas is 3-1. Vanderbilt, a team that's kind of surprised people a little bit this year, they are also undefeated. So this game in particular has some big ramifications. As Dawn said, South Carolina then plays Vandy next Sunday. So there's a lot that's coming through as we get into this conference slate. So, guys, just how are we feeling about this game tonight? Kevin, I'll start with you.
We've been talking about Vic Schaefer's comments after this LSU game about how he thinks there's a vendetta against Texas. We've been talking about this all week, and the more we talk about it, the more I just can't believe he said that he went out in front of a microphone and basically gave his team an excuse to not perform tonight in maybe their biggest game of the season so far, going on the road against the second-ranked team in the country. Because, there's gamesmanship these coaches play all the time. They can go out there and say, nobody's calling fouls on us. And they say that so that in the next game, the refs are looking at things a little bit more closely to make sure they get those foul calls. That's the kind of stuff I can understand. But to just, I'm still blown away that he said this and he's given Dawn Staley this kind of ammunition going into this game. The other thing we haven't really talked about is the new player for the Gamecocks. And I can't even begin to get this girl's name right. Alicia Tornbys, the young lady from France that's coming over to play. Tonight's supposed to be the night she makes her debut. Great game for her to get thrown into the fire against a number 4 ranked team in the country. But I want to hear from you, Julie, about what you think she's going to bring to this team. But Tegan, your thoughts on this game tonight as well.
Yeah, I have to go off of the messaging that you were talking about, because let's say the Longhorns do lose this one. What's Vic Schaefer going to say after the game in that case? Is he once again going to go with the excuse of, we had to play LSU and South Carolina in the same week and this whole vendetta against us? So, yeah, the messaging is just really tough to hear from him in a tough conference where you have to prove if you're worthy or not. But, yeah, also to your point about the transfer that they're getting in, she's somebody that the Gamecocks could really use right now, especially because their players are getting so much time out there on the court with so few of them. So, yeah, Julia, just your thoughts on the transfer coming in and the impact she can have.
Of course, we haven't gotten to see her play just yet, but if you've been paying attention online at all, there have been some exciting highlights of her gameplay in France. Of course, there's been so much made about her being 6'7" and, you know, she can dunk and all of these things that she can do. I do think she is filling a void that South Carolina really needs right now. And that's a lot of, you know, height and length that they, of course, get with Okot. But, you know, just you can never have enough of that. And I think this is really going to help them with their gameplay in the paint, which they already excel so well in. And it's going to be something interesting to see how she kind of fits in to all these rotations that they have kind of cemented so far this season, and how they really utilize her and how much she's really gotten to digest in the past couple of weeks since she's gotten here. But hey, just so everybody knows, for your highlight reads, it's Alicia Tornabees, but they do call her Allie. Carmine, how are we feeling?
Much better after you successfully pronounced her name, Julia. But
that's my
no, I
Duolingo
think,
streak
like you
right
said,
there. Thank you.
kept a streak. Streak is alive. And you know what's also good is, like you said, when Okot comes out, no offense to Adele Tack, but I think they lose quite a bit when Okot comes out, and Tornabees could provide, you know, maybe the 1-2 punch that they need inside, and not have that drop off. And great to have another dunker on the team with Ashlyn Watkins sitting out this year. You know, we loved her dunk. She had 2 of them in a couple seasons, and I'm excited to see her get back onto the court. So can't wait to see this heavyweight matchup. Doesn't bode well for Vic Schaefer that it's in Columbia, but Texas, like you said, did take down the Gamecocks by just 2 points thanks to a Rory Harmon last-second shot. So we'll see what happens in the top 5 matchup. Love to see that. And let's get to Clemson as well, because this Tigers team, now nowhere near the Gamecocks, I'll admit, but they have won 7 of their last 9. They're coming into form, heading deeper into the ACC schedule, although they did just lose a heartbreaker late to Georgia Tech, 58-55. But before that, they just broke their 15-year losing streak to NC State, guys. They hadn't won a game against NC State in their last 16 matchups with the team. And as you well know, NC State has had a good program. They've made the NCAA tournament 8 of the last 9 years, even a game that we all covered just 2 seasons ago when they faced off against the Gamecocks all the way in the Final Four. So huge momentum builder for Sean Poppy and his squad to get a win over NC State a couple games ago. And now they're heading back to where Coach Poppy used to coach at Virginia Tech, where he was 6 seasons as an assistant coach, even an associate head coach, helped turn around that program like he has everywhere he's been, and help them to a top 10 spot and a perennial power for Virginia Tech. So, Kevin, what do you think about the Clemson women going to Virginia Tech and trying to get another conference win against Poppy's old team?
Yeah, you know, any coach is going to say you go back to your old stomping ground, that it's just another game and he's not too worried about it, and, you know, the colors of the jerseys don't matter. But, you know, any coach is going to want to get a win in this game. Going back to your old stomping ground, you're going to want to show everybody I made the right move, and leaving this place was the right move for me. And I'm showing this now by showing you how much I've improved this new team I'm on and how much better they're doing. And they're going to get a win against you, and that's going to help show everybody that this was the right move. So I don't care what Coach Poppy says about this, but you know he wants to win this game pretty bad, Julia.
Absolutely. I mean, when you take into consideration any coach going back to their old stomping grounds, you know how much that they would really want to get a win there, whether they say it or not. I don't think many coaches come out and say, hey, I know I was here and I really need to beat this team. But, you know, there's something inside there that makes it a little bit more interesting. But, you know, of course, you know, you want to get a win, but you really want to get a win a little bit more when you're in this situation, Tegan.
Oh, yeah, you totally do. I mean, we talked about it at the beginning of football season with Beamer going back to Virginia Tech and playing them, of course, well, on neutral territory, but still wanting to get that win over them. We've got some more basketball coming up on the other side of this break, so we'll be right back with more Palmetto Sports Daily. Welcome back to Palmetto Sports Daily. We've got some more basketball to talk about because CCU men's basketball, for the very first time in program history, beat Marshall on the road in Huntington, West Virginia. And this was a game with 5 lead changes. Marshall led by about 5 at one point. Coastal's biggest lead was 12. Didn't exactly end that way. They got the win in a close one, 85-83, but it was because of two really high impact players, and both of them are transfers. Joshua Beadle, who of course, Carmine, we've talked a little bit about, spent some time at Clemson, then he was at Boston College. Now here he is in Conway. And then also A.J. Dantzler, transfer from Lemoyne College, a small college in upstate New York. Both of them had 26 points on the night. For Beadle, it was a new career high at Coastal, who had actually just set a career high against App State with 25 points. So he's on a pretty good bracket to keep building and everything. But Coastal Carolina getting their second straight Sun Belt win, really starting to see success in this part of the season. This also marks their 10th win of the year, which is the number of wins they got all of last season. And it took them until pretty much the very end to get that 10th win. So I know that fans are really excited, finally hitting this mark just at a much earlier point in the season. And now Coastal Carolina will be on the road taking on Georgia Southern. So they will stay on the road. They'll be traveling. Georgia Southern is 3-3 in conference play. They're 6-12 overall. So there's a pretty high chance, guys, that Coastal could get a third straight Sun Belt win, and I would have to look back, but I'm pretty sure that has not happened in the previous 2 years that I've been covering them. So really exciting stuff for the Chants as they get ready to hit the road again. But Kevin, I know that Charleston Southern didn't exactly have as successful of a night.
Yeah, it was a disappointing night for the Bucs, especially coming off their first home loss of the season this past weekend against first place High Point, the team leading the Big South. CSU had been undefeated at home up until that point, 7-0 on the year. They lost that game to High Point, looked to bounce back last night against USC Upstate, and they had a pretty solid performance, especially a couple guys. Alon Sumler scored 35 points, had 5 rebounds, 5 assists. Also, Bryson Blaine had 26 points to go with 11 rebounds. So the guys had the performances. They were leading at halftime. They were up by 8 with a couple minutes to go in the second half, but USC Upstate would end the game on an 8-0 run. I should say end regulation on an 8-0 run, because that would end up sending things into overtime, and in overtime the Bucs just could not get things going as they end up falling in this one 86-81, so they dropped their second straight game at home. They're now 11-9 on the season, 2-2 in the Big South, and this despite, you see these highlights. They had some great plays, some nice alley-oop dunks, some threes just bouncing their way. Great take. That's Sumler right there. Like I said, he had 35 points. But it was a disappointing night for the Bucs to not come away with a win in this one as they dropped their second straight home game, this one to USC Upstate. But I would say it is nowhere near the disappointment that South Carolina had last night as they were on the road, Julia, against 17th-ranked Arkansas.
Yeah, the Gamecocks, they also lose a second straight game, and this one was pretty rough. It's 108-74, the final at number 17th ranked Arkansas. It kind of looked outmatched pretty much from the beginning, and there wasn't really anything that South Carolina could have done. I mean, Paris said it himself, Lamont Paris. He said they didn't respond to a lot of things, especially in the second half. That's kind of where it really got away from them, and it was just disappointing across the board. And I would say it was a stark difference from the first 3 SEC games, where we just talked about this a couple of days ago. South Carolina might have gone 1-2 in their first 3 SEC games, but they showed a lot of promise in what they could be and the team that they could become. But then it felt like in this 4th game, that kind of all just fell apart. And it was really disappointing to see, and it's their worst loss of SEC play so far. I would argue it's their worst loss of the season. And, you look at the stat lines. I mean, they got outscored in the paint 66-36. Paris said it was everything on both ends. They couldn't prevent Arkansas from getting inside, and they couldn't get inside themselves. Michi Johnson had 29 points. He was the only player in double figures for the Gamecocks. Arkansas had 6 players in double figures. So just a really disappointing night as they come home back to Columbia off of this game, and now they kind of just have to right the ship and set their sights on the next one. But here's Lamont Paris kind of talking about that night in the paint.
We didn't fight. I don't know if we've ever given up 66 points in the paint to anybody. So you have to fight. You have to be competitive. They made a lot of easy ones. They made a couple tough ones too. But if you're a good team like that and you smell blood in the water and the wheels start rattling, then it turned into a pickup game, and everybody was seeing everything go in. So It just was, I don't think we competed to keep the ball out of that area necessarily at all.
Well, South Carolina will stay on the road. They are at Auburn this Saturday at 6 o'clock. Of course, the Tigers coming off a very disappointing 10-point loss at Mizzou last night. So both teams kind of wanting to figure things out as we enter this weekend of games. But, yeah, just a tough one for the Gamecocks, Carmine.
Yeah, and I really liked what Lamont said, even though the result was obviously terrible, giving up almost 110 points. But you got to check your pride and your competitiveness, like he said. I mean, giving up 108 points, 2 guys off the bench for the Razorbacks scored 18 and 21 and hardly missed a shot. And then the former Gamecock, Nick Pringle, I guess that's a silver lining for Gamecocks fans, but he's now on Arkansas and scored 15 points and 7 rebounds. So, they got to do some soul searching, especially on defense, because when you're only shooting 23% from 3, you're going to have to get some stops. But we'll stop right here. We'll be back with some high school reclassification right after this.
Welcome back to Palmetto Sports Daily. We go down to the high school level where today, the first day, the appellate panel for the South Carolina High School League was hearing appeals from schools that aren't happy with their classification placement and hoping to move up or down going into next year. One of those schools was James Island. They're a 5A school hoping to be moved down to 4A this year. Their initial appeal was denied earlier this week, so they went in front of the appellate panel today. That didn't go too well either for James Island as they were voted down 6-0, so they'll be staying in 5A. It got a little bit spicy also between both sides, between James Island and the appellate panel. James Island's athletic director, Jeremy Holland, was very passionate about the fact that he thinks this multiplier isn't fair to schools like his, and he was saying that, he needs to have his school move down to 4A. The appellate panel told him that he was talking a little hard toward them and being disrespectful towards the panel, which if you're an adult and you're not talking to someone who's not paying you, I don't think is a thing that's going to end up too well, Tegan.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Kevin. We had a couple of schools that appealed. Most of them got denied. The only one that was approved was Marlboro County. They'll move from 3A to 2A. We'll have to keep you updated on this, but that's all the time we have for Palmetto Sports Daily. Check out our podcast, as always, and see you tomorrow.